new.
Sorry, just
Right.
remembered.
Yeah, good one, Ian.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, because I've, as much as I've been treasurer of organisations besides Toastmaster and managed funds and things like that in previous iterations of life, I always approach any training session as an opportunity to learn something new.
Yeah,
because you never know. You never know.
Yeah, I love there's a passion there, right? So we think
I
about.
like to hear the way other people do it, other clubs. You can always pick up something that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we go along because we have a passion to learn something new. We've done it multiple times, or we see how other clubs do it. We want to get ideas. And I think that's very much comes from a space of, I'm okay with my role. Maybe my club's doing particularly well, but it's all about refinement, right? It's all about like these 1%ers sitting around the top of what we do. Yeah, I'd like to hear about how others do things in the chat from Rosie, because we're a learning organisation. Yeah, and I think Paul, there's a type of person joins Toastmasters, people who like to learn, people who like to just do self-development anyway. I want to loop back to what Lorraine said, which is they've never done the role before. Let's assume that people are coming to us because they're new in the role. And it's December now. We've had people doing this role for 6 months. They're still new at the role, I would say. Why do they come? What's the emotion that people come to club officer training with? If they're not sure how to do their role, they're coming to us, and what do they feel?
Well, a bit nervous about doing the role when they have no tools to do it with, or don't know where to find those tools.
Yeah, they don't have the tools, they don't have the knowledge. Yeah. What do they need in that case on that? If they're nervous, if they're maybe a bit panicked even, or overwhelmed, what do they need?
Information and the knowledge that others have been there before them.
Yep.
And just a degree of confidence to it's not rocket science.
A degree of confidence. Yep.
They need assurance that they're going to be able to do it to start with, particularly if their predecessor wasn't very good in the role.
That is not fun. Yeah. Need assurance they're on the right track. What about this, which is they need to know how to do their job. Right, and I think that's what happens. They come along, they're like, I'm new to treasurer, I don't really know what needs to happen. If we can spell out to them, this is how you do it. Because I think the what we need to do is really clear. Manage the money, do some budgets. We can read the club leadership handbook, right? What we have to do is really easy. It's the how that gets tricky, and it's the how that experience gives people. It's the how that we all carry that we need to explain onwards. And the other thing I think we touched on, and Ian was passion. There's enthusiasm, there's a new opportunity here, and we need to give them the tools to be able to move forward in their role. And we don't want them to be reinventing the wheel of a budget template, every year, right? We want to give them the tools that help them to move forward faster than they otherwise would have. So a question I have is, this might be difficult for some of us, but I want you to think all the way back to your first club officer training session that you attended as a fresh-faced sergeant at arms, or whatever it might have been, or maybe the last time you went to club officer training and you sat in a role for the very first time. Who has the experience of walking away from that club officer training and you're still just not sure what and how you need to do? Yeah. So we have this weird world we live in, where you've got a trainer who knows sort of arguably too much, and they've got an hour to fit it into, but what we end up doing is walking away from club officer training. I still see this happen with people who now sort of feel like they know nothing more. And it's like, what went wrong there, right? If you spend an hour in the room with somebody who's an expert, you should walk away with some good idea. And so we're going to talk about how do we stop that from happening. Like, I'm professionally a trainer. I identify as wanting to have this reputation as a good trainer, right? I want people to walk away from my sessions going, that was good, that was helpful, he was great, right? And I would hope that everybody in this room wants the same thing. You want people to walk away from your session, if not thinking that you're great, but that at least that session was helpful. I have some tools and confidence to move forwards. So I think it's a very, we find ourselves in a beautiful place where we can sort of break that cycle. Okay, so the common issues that we face. Obviously, we have a wealth of knowledge. We have 1, 2, 10, 50 years of knowledge to offload in just 1 hour. Time is really difficult. I have a question. Oh, I've lost it now. That's right. Time is difficult. The other thing is, I see this over and over again, is we get people who won't jump into the club off to do club offset training because they think they have to create resources. And we feel like we have to create resources, or we have to suffer the Toastmasters defaults, like PowerPoints that they give us that we've all seen far too many times. Rosie's like giving me PTSD looks. Yeah, we get it, right? So we feel like we have to put in all this bloody effort beforehand, and nobody wants to do that because we're already giving up an hour on a Sunday afternoon to go across to whichever community centre and train. And then I think the other problem is we feel like training has to be interactive. And that's not a bad thing. We feel like training has to be interactive. We get a bit scared of delivering. Does anybody get like a bit scared of just telling people a little bit what they need to do? Does anyone find that a bit off-putting? A little bit. There's some vague nods in the room. I'll take it, right? I think we get scared of, telling people this is the way to do it because, everybody's opinion in Toastmasters matters, and we feel we have to be interactive. And so I think the answer there is, who would rather just hear from you? You're a first timer in a role. Let's say you're a first-time VPM, will do. First-time VPM, you go to club officer training. Would you rather go to a training where I have somebody, standing at the front of the room who's got 25, 30 members in their club and telling me what the heck their secret is? Or would you rather go into a room and they just sort of say, look, let's just go around the room and see what everybody thinks. And we have to hear from Dave over here who has 8 members and Steve who's got 10 members. I don't feel like I'm getting anything from that. So what I want to do today is give us a framework where we can, as people who are successful and experienced in our roles, just give the content that people need without it being a lecture. Yeah? Great. That's the common issues, right? Time, we don't want to create stuff, but also we don't want to just like lecture at people, and we don't want to have this around the room discussion. Question, I'll get you to drop this one in the chat. If you're unfamiliar with Zoom, there should be a green button down the bottom of your screen. It's incorrect. Down the bottom of the screen, there's a button that says chat. It's probably next to the green button. Don't click the green button. It's next to the green button. In the chat, I want you to put in there, if you're presenting at club officer training in February, March, whatever's upcoming, which role do you most want to train? What's like your role? What's the one you want to train? And either it's the one you're most comfortable with, maybe you've done the role a bunch of times, maybe, I don't know, you want to get stuck into it, right? Like, hey, I've been VPE for 3 years in a row now, it's time for me to help others, right? VPM, VPE, Sergeant Arms, Treasurer, President. We're going to have a full executive here in a second. This is great. I'm freezing and breaking up, according to somebody. Am I jerky for anyone else? No, okay. Yep. Oh, sorry, Karen, it might be a fiddle your internet connection there, but hopefully you get enough here. President, yep. What are we missing? Is anybody a VPPR person, or is it just me? Karen, yep, VPPR. I'm a VPPR as well. Okay. So we've just got the full executive there. That's great.
No secretary.
No secretary. That's fine. No secretary. Fair enough. So just have a little think about what session you would like to most train, because it's probably going to help you frame what we're going to talk about today. Ideally today, what we can walk away with is an outline. You can probably walk away from today with an outline of exactly what you would train come February or come March. And that's really helpful because I think we've just got the one division director in the room, a couple of area directors, right? If like John, if you're looking for trainers, have a look around this room. If you're an area director or somebody else, have a think about who your division director is. And at the end of the day, you should be able to go to them and say, hey, I'm ready to train President at your club officer training. Because I've been a division director, it's bloody hard to find trainers sometimes. So it can be really helpful today to walk away with a bit of an outline and understanding and just volunteer. Lorraine, you have your hand up.
Yes, you're saying that, you know, doing our training in February or March, whatever, having all this new stuff, this is the second round. So we should have a whole lot of members there who have been doing the role for at least 6 months. So that would make a little bit of a difference to what we teach them in February. Certainly your comment for the first round in June, July, or July, August, whenever, that would be the time, yes, to hand out for the new people and the new stuff. So whether that makes a difference, I don't know.
I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. In June, July, August, whenever we do it, you get the sheer panic. Like, it's always like, oh crap, I got nominated to be, you know, VPM in my club, now what? I think what happens in February, March is the panic has gone, but often sort of the overwhelm and just memory has kicked in, right? So people are coming to us or coming to club officer training, like, you know, I've got maybe a couple of things dialed in, but the rest of it, you know, I've mentally forgotten. Or, I mean, it's the same as like, how many times do we have to be told a thing before it actually like sinks in? I wouldn't get too scared in general about aiming to, what am I trying to say here? Oh, don't be scared about aiming too base level, even in February, March, right? Because I think we can overestimate, and this is not like me being condescending to the Toastmaster community, but I think we can overestimate how much people have advanced in those first 6 months. Because I think we know, even at the end of 12 months, you're kind of just getting into the groove of a first-time role in general. And what happens is, you know, we'll have this discussion, maybe, you know, we'll go through the content that we're going to go through. And if people are doing that particularly well, great. They feel good because they're doing well. Or maybe they pick up those few extra tips and tools, and they'll pick up entirely new content on the rest of it. For the second round, we don't intend doing training by role. Cool, that's fine, John. You'll apply exactly the same thing to club growth. I don't know what your topics are, but you'll apply exactly the same thing. I just use club officers because they're pretty universal. So where to? We're going to operate on this triangle. I like drawing triangles. If I haven't drawn a triangle, it's not a real session. So we're going to do 3 things here today. The first is I'm going to give you a structure for organizing your thoughts and being able to share your knowledge in the allocated time. We're going to look at how to use and share resources for your club, for your session, without having to like build a new PowerPoint or, you know, suffer the tired templates. And you'll notice, like, I'm going to run a session here today. I haven't made a PowerPoint. I very rarely present with slides. I'm a whiteboard and scribble kind of person. And then lastly, we're going to look at engagement. All right, engagement, how to keep your audience engaged, but stay in control of the discussion. So I think we can all agree there's nothing worse than going to a session and there is no engagement. We've been there. So that's what we're going to look at today. Structure, resources, and engagement. Sound good? Should we kick on? All right. Like I said, you can apply this to any training session. Guarantee this will work, whether it's first or second round COT. I run a very similar thing, even when I present at DLT. I run a very similar thing for pretty much any training that I do. So let's start with structure. It's now over here on my right. That's great. And blocking my aircon. That's very rude. Out of my way. Okay, so we're going to start with the structure that organizes your thoughts. You can share your knowledge in the allocated time. I have a question again, which is, has anybody here ever trained before? You're given the 60 minutes, the full hour, and somebody comes in, they give you the 5-minute warning, and you've gotten through like half of what you wanted to get through. Yeah. And usually the first word you say has 4 letters, right? Really easy trap to fall into. And I get it, again, because we have all this information and a very short amount of time to put it into. So yeah, we're generally given about an hour to present. And when you shove a year of being present into an hour, it can be super overwhelming, let alone if you've done president 4 times and you have like 4 times the information. You know, if you've been an area director and you've seen multiple clubs, or you've visited multiple clubs, you have all these ideas. But the important thing to remember is, regardless of the amount of information in your head, you can never fit a bucket into a thimble, regardless of how fast you pour. What we're going to look at today is not how do we increase the rate of information communication. We're going to look at how do we have the right amount of information. So why would we have a structure to our training sessions?
It keeps us on track, keep us in direction.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. Keep us on track. What do you mean by that, Lorraine?
So we don't easily get directed by people asking us questions that come out of left field, and we then know where we are heading.
Yeah, you keep us on, rather than like, oh, but Lorraine, in my club, sometimes we send a text message to guests.
Yep.
Yeah. Why else do we have a structure? So divide things up appropriately. Yep.
Make sure the main points get out.
The main points get out. Yep. And I think that's a big one, which is, you know, I've been president of 5 different clubs. The amount I could talk on president, there's probably 62 dot points, right? Each of those would be a 20-minute discussion. But at some point, I have to choose what's most important to my people in my room today. Yeah, perfect. Paul, you were on mute. You're still on mute, but I think you were talking to me.
Yes, I was just going to say it's a good discipline for the presenter to prepare the session to have a structure sorted out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You look like you know what the heck you're on about. You know, you look professional when you turn up. We're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. Yeah, it looks great. Yeah, and the big one for me is keeps us on track, so it keeps us on message and keeps us on time. Because has anybody ever seen a group of Toastmasters get chatty? Like all the time. Is a lesson plan too outdated? I'm not sure, John. I'm going to show you what I use, and you'll decide if you want to sort of have extra on top of that or not. But we're going to use what's comfortable. So I'm going to give the answer. I'm going to give you my answer anyway, and it's a structure that works. What I always do is I start with in a speech we would call the body, but in training session I call the content, right? The middle bit. I'm not super concerned about the introduction and the conclusion just yet. And it uses, would you believe, the rule of 3, the same rule of 3 that we've heard a million times. This is no different. We're going to find 3 big ideas. The 3 big ideas as it pertains to our role. And I want you to think about the role that you're interested in training. So we had them before, PR, president, you know what the roles are. And we're going to use this fancy doodad. If you've seen it before, congratulations. And this is what we call the and less triangle. And we're going to narrow all the way down to just 3 big ideas. And I know that 3 big ideas means that approximately 58 other ideas are going to be left not communicated. But the more we think about what our 3 biggest main ideas are, the more we will be left with the best, most pertinent stuff to our group. And so, like you pointed out, Lorraine, that might be very slightly different in June than it is in February. Things might change there. Maybe we can assume by February that treasurers have done a budget. So we can kind of leave that big idea for June only. We talk about something different in February for an idea. So you will notice here, I'll look at the wrong thing. You'll notice here, this triangle looks rather familiar. It looks awfully like this one. You know, I know that how to be a trainer has many, many ideas, but the biggest ones, the most useful, are structure, resources, and engagement. And we call it the and less triangle because on the sides, you are not allowed to put the word and. So I have the word resources. I don't have the word, visuals and templates. I don't have the word resources and timing and something. It's one idea, one big idea. You are not allowed to put the word and anywhere near this triangle. That's its only rule. So I want you to think about the role that you would like to train, or you're going to train, or what have you, and the three big ideas, no word and pick the three biggest items that you know people need now to do their role. Okay, so for example, I'm going to use VPE as an example. Maybe the way that you look at VPE is chronological. I'm going to stop the share there for a second. Maybe the way you look at VPE is chronological. So perhaps your three sides might be before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting, or business meetings, right? Three things: before, during, after. Maybe you think about it chronological, and that's how you do it. Maybe your chronology is like a forward plan, an agenda, and during the meeting. However you think about it, right? Maybe you're a chronological type person. I'm not. I am more of a categorical type person. So that's why I have my triangle. But for VPE, it could be, it could talk about like agenda, how you put together the agenda. Might talk about forward planning, and then you might talk about pathways, right? None of those come before or after the other, but you might do agenda, forward plan, pathways, right? Could be the three big things that you want to touch on, right? I'm going to be just awkward for a moment here because I need to share this into the chat. I'm going to share the triangle. And what I want to do is, feel free to download that. That's the workbook. It has the triangle on there. What I want to do is give you just a couple of, actually, I need to look at something in the background, sorry. Nope, that's okay. What I want you to do is to download the triangle or on whatever piece of paper you have handy, draw yourself a little triangle and think about the role that you want to train and what the three big ideas are that you would put on the sides of your triangle. This doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just chasing a version 1, but I just want you to think about it. I'm going to give us, a couple of minutes. I want you to properly write it down. Remember, no word and. If I see any ands, I'll tell you not to do it. That's really it. So look, I'm going to put myself on mute. We're going to have 2 minutes. It's just ticked over past now. At 32 minutes past, we'll come back and I'm keen to hear what your three things are. Go for it. All right, 30 seconds. Oh, 2 minutes, look at that. Time flies when it's not a table topic. All right, you've got your 3 things. Drop in the chat, put in the role that you're thinking about, and then what your 3 sides are. What are your 3 big ideas? Feel free to put them in the chat. Yeah, and give us the 3 things as well. Ian, I think the return key got away from you there. What, 2 treasurers, right? Budget, that's good. Good thing I don't do English as a hobby. Budget, monthly health check, and membership from Jennifer. Yeah. Hey, Jennifer, do you want to come off mute and just tell me about those 3? Do you want to just tell me, like, what do you think? Like a sentence for each one. What would be in budget, monthly health check, and membership?
I think budget is it's really looking at, well, what's coming in and what we'll be spending utilizing the income. So majority will be from the membership fees, but maybe we'll also get a little bit of grants from the club, things like that. And so that's an annual exercise. And then the monthly is really, okay, we're done the budget. Now how are we going every month? So let's look at our bank balance, let's see how we're traveling. And then the membership fee is one of the treasurer's duty is actually collecting the fees and make sure we pay on time. Yeah.
Nice, cool. It sounds like a solid session. I'm keen to go to Jennifer's session and hear about how to be a treasurer. Good, good, good. John also went with treasurer, budget, banking, members. So different to Jennifer's, not wildly different, but different, right? And I think that's the key here. I'm going to see, I'm going to guess Ian there. Cash book, actual first budget, fees, exchange rate thing. Again, similar, but not exactly. So 3 treasurers straight out the gate, something slightly different. This is the point. There is not a wrong answer. Now, I should say there is not a right answer. There is wrong answers. It's to have like a list of 50, right? But there is no correct. All 3 are valid. I've confused myself now, right? All 3 are valid. However you see it and are able to train it and break it up, perfect. Lorraine, VPE. Lorraine, I'm going to get you off mute. You've got agenda, pathways, forward plan. It sounds familiar, but tell me just a sentence on each one of those.
Okay, you pick what I would do anyway.
Okay.
For the agenda, I would look at how they set out the agenda for the night, how they would look at the timing. Would people have enough time to do their projects and to move on to the next item on the agenda, to make sure that everybody gets a role somehow. For the forward plan, to keep in mind that the members' goals, to help them to achieve the goals that they want to achieve, and to also make sure that everybody has a fair go for presenting speeches and presenting some of the minor roles and so on. And then for pathways, how to submit stuff to pathways, how to find their way through pathways, because pathways is so incredibly confusing. And by the time the new pathway system comes in January, I'll probably be just as confused as they are. So
I like you do pathways as if you've got 4 hours. No, no, perfect, great. We landed at the same answer, solving the case. But good. VPM from Rosie, membership retention, membership increase. I love both of those. And how to get other members as your assistants. Love it. VPPR, where to advertise, how to create material and branding rules. Cool. Like it, Karen. And again, that's different to how I would do VPPR. I do VPPR slightly differently. But again, if I go to Karen's session, I feel like that's going to make some sense and get me ahead as a VPPR. Susan, Suzanne, I'm keen on yours. If you're able to come off mute, we got first impressions, resources, and timing as SAA. Yeah, what's your 1 sentence on each of those?
First impressions is setting up the club meetings, because guests and all that will, how perceive the club. What was it? Let me get to my chat.
You had first impressions, resources, and timing.
Resources, so that's having content, handouts and stuff like that for the guests and members. So the agenda's there, everything, resources, and timing is being on time to being early to meetings to be able to have that all set up and ready for everyone.
Love it, love it. And again, yeah, could well be different to other side arms. It's like you call it resources. I'd call that like guest packs and stuff. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't really matter what we call it as long as we have our 3 things there. Shakara, yeah, loading you up with listening, thinking, typing. Might be the last time I do it today. So you've got how the first 6 months went, how the second role fits into personal goals, and who will take over succession. Cool, love it. I like that for second round in the role. We got president from Paul, the role, timetable, leadership. Cool. So we've got our 3 sides of our triangle. And the reason you always put it on a triangle, I literally always draw it on a triangle, is because the moment you let yourself put it into a list, you'll think, oh, but that 4th point, and I guarantee at that point, you've got too much information and you're going to run over time. This is a brutal exercise. I get it, to say you get 3 and 3 only and no ands. But this level of refinement and going to what is the most important pillar of what people need to hear about their role or club at this point makes for training that is implemented. It makes for differences in clubs. You know, and I know you're going to walk away from a session having presented 3% of your information, but we're going to start getting clubs to a bit of a base level of where they're doing the big things well, and we can start over time stacking on top of that. And that's why we like, you know, share our contact information at the end of a session or have area director visits, all those types of things. So we're halfway through the structure. And now we should probably have a look at the rest of the structure. Going to take do some screen share here as well. Okay. Can everyone see the triangle? I'm not sure I shared that correctly. There's some nodding. I've got a triangle on screen. Give me a thumbs up. Yep, cool. So what we're going to do is take our 3 ideas that we wrote down here, and this is the actual structure that I use that still has some scribbles on it, right? This is the actual structure that I use. And our big ideas drop into the body, okay? Big idea 1, big idea 2, big idea 3. We know what we're going to train on. Up the very top, introduction, okay? Actually, sorry, at the very top is session title. Yeah, you call that whatever the club officer role is. It's as simple as that. I like to give sessions that are not club officer roles a slightly different name, something a bit exciting. So I usually call this session the Inspiring Trainer Jumpstart, or from leader to trainer, but title's not always super important. The introduction, though, we're going to cover a couple of very specific things here, right? So what is the purpose of the role? You can pitch this as a bit of a discussion from experienced people in the room. You know, what's the purpose of VPPR? What are we trying to do? You know, what's the purpose of treasurer? What does the treasurer do? And we make sure that that doesn't go too long. And then what do we want to achieve today? And that's not a question I would ask, that's something I would spell out. What I want to achieve today is to ensure that we walk away with X, Y, and Z that we talked about. And so this makes sure that everybody understands the scope, so the boundaries of what it is that we're going to talk about today, which starts to curb quite quickly somebody in the middle of treasurer session asking something about pathways, right? It keeps us on scope. They understand why they're here, and you set those boundaries. We then can move into our 3 pieces of content. And I've lost my notes here very quickly. Yep, right at the end, Q&A. So, you can even go into here, maybe if there is no questions, you can have some common issues. An issue I commonly see people have with their forward planner, and any final questions in there. I can sometimes be a bit of a cowboy. I'll happily take questions through my content. Maybe you don't want to do that. And you can save your questions to the end. That's a personal choice. And then right at the end, 5 minutes for conclusion, contact details. Thanks for coming. Everybody meet back in the main room after this, whatever it might be in the conclusion. That's the layout I use. That's it. That's how I do it. The most important thing on this sheet, that actually, if I get the download I just sent, you know what I'm going to do? Wrong. This one. You can see down in the bottom left is the little space to put timings in. Now this is a big reason of why we have a structure, is to make sure that we keep to time. So when we jump over to where they're filled out, this is how I, maybe recommend you do it. 10 minutes to start. And that also can include, if you're just a little bit late to start, people drip in. So we've got 10 minutes to start, 10 minutes for each big idea, 10 minutes Q&A at the end. So we're up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 55 minutes. Conclusion for 5 minutes, 55 minutes total. We're inside the hour. That's how we do it. The thing you need to be careful of is being like insanely, you really got to stick to these times. Really got to know. You might have 3 different times here. You might think, the third one needs 12 minutes. The first one only needs 8. You could stretch out, but you need to make sure that you stick to time, because that's what happens. We get stuck into big idea 1, which is all about how to attract guests. And then we end up there for 30 minutes and it takes too long. So you have to be real adamant about the time, which means you have to think very carefully around how much detail am I going to go into for each of those items. All right. Let's stop the share. Is that helpful to people, what we've gone through? Yeah, it might be a little bit different to what you're used to, I'm sure. And I know that it's a brutal process, but I know that it gives good results. John, you have your hand up. Your hand's down, but you're still on mute. I'm sorry. You're still on mute. I'm sorry, John. Can you hear us okay, John? Because you're still on mute.
You might need to shout a bit louder.
Yeah. Can you hear us okay, John? Because you're still on mute.
I don't know what's going on here.
Oh, there we go.
The appearance of my screen has altered completely. But anyway,
That's
going back to where I started from, the question I put in chat was, what is the maximum time for a training session? And I guess what I'm looking for is an optimum time. Now, in that example of structure that you just went through, you went 55 minutes. My feeling, and maybe I'm wrong about this, I think people stop listening after about 40 minutes, but it's just, I guess it's how good your audience is and how well you have them engaged. But, and this is more a question for people who are planning the training rather than people who are delivering the training. But yeah, I guess my message is really just don't make your training sessions too long.
Pretty much, John. Yeah. You're right. If you ask people to just sit and listen, they're done. I think it's even worse than that. I think it's about 18 minutes. People are just done. Toastmasters want us to do an hour of club offs and breakouts, which is written somewhere that I could find if you wanted, which is why we have to look at that bottom part down here about engagement. We have to provide something interesting for people to engage in some way, shape or form. Yeah. Yep. No, it's absolutely worth being aware of, John. Shakara's got her hand up.
It sometimes depends on how many you've got in the session too, because sometimes I've seen training sessions where there are only 4 people and then training sessions where there are 20. So it just depends on how many are there as to how long it takes to get through it. And as a facilitator, you like to have everyone have a go at least once.
Yeah, in general, you're absolutely right. And so there's 2 ways you go there. So the way is, if you want everyone to have a go, you need to be very aware that 20 people speaking for a minute each is a third of your time. Or you need to say you get a sentence each, which can still take a lot of time, which is very difficult. The way I like to do it is when I have a sharing time, which we just saw when I said, put your 3 things and to come off mute, I will say I'll have 3 sharers. I don't care if there's 3 people in the room or 300, 3 people are going to share. And because I know how long that will take, that's my methodology. And I find I can pick the right people to share, which is the people who are going to get the most out of it. Maybe they're first timers. Maybe I'll get somebody experienced first. Maybe it's the people who are a bit more extroverted looking and ready to go. But yeah, I regardless have the same number of people that I'm going to ask to speak at a time, just out of time's sake. Why don't we move on to a bit of a shorter section here? By the way, I think we've got half an hour left in this session, just in case you're wondering. We're going to move on to the side of the triangle, resources, which is, what do you give out during a session? What are the things that the bits that you actually provide to the people who are in your session? Because again, we don't want to have to create an extra bunch of workload, making a PowerPoint or handouts or a workbook. And I think the TI resources often don't reflect accurately what we do necessarily. I think they're a great starting place, but when we get to sort of training, we've usually refined that a whole bunch, which is why I call them tired. They're tired in our context. Here's my rule for a resource, which is you've been doing a role, you've got something that assists you and works. That's a resource. Bring it. That's it. So look, give me some examples of resources that that you use in your club that help you. And before you jump in, here's how I know it's a resource, a good resource, which is when I share it with people, it has to come with the sentence, this is a thing that contributes to the success of our club. So it's not just like, this has sometimes been helpful, or this is something that I saw or downloaded or was given 3 years ago, but this is a thing that contributes to the success of our club. So it's used regularly. It contributes, right? So give me some ideas. Feel free to put them in the chat. What's a resource you could use given the triangle that you've just outlined? You can also come off mute if you would like as well and just tell me. A meeting template, yeah. I'm assuming like an agenda template, yeah, absolutely. It's nicely into VPE or VPM training for sure. 3 or 4 month forward planner, beautiful, Lorraine. That's something even I've shared. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Treasure and Excel spreadsheet template for budget. I agree. I agree. Especially if you're training someone like me who I don't have a template for a club budget because I've never done the bloody role. That'd be a really helpful thing to pick up, right? How to calculate the monthly club fee with, yep. And that's going to involve conversion and the club component. And yep, I love it. It's a complex world to have a tool for. Personal tips and tricks. Yeah, it's a tricky one, Paul. Because I would like something that is like a thing, like a physical, tangible, or electronic thing rather than a list, I guess. If you could convert that maybe into like a checklist, would be really cool. So for presidents, like here's a checklist I use to do club officer meetings, something like that. Old school red officer handbook manual. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, handbook manual. Yep. If you've got hard copies of those, yeah. I would always encourage you, if you've got a personalized version of it, is even better again than the generics. Easy Speak, yeah, cool. And again, Easy Speak's not something that's used by every club. So, we're going to go along to your session, Suzanne, and this is how they use Easy Speak. Amazing. So good. And this is how ideas properly get shared between clubs. So I think it's all well and good to go to a session, to use VP, for example, and say, you need to do a forward plan, and the forward plan does X, Y, and Z. And then we ask people to go and try and implement that. And it's really difficult on information alone to actually make a change in our club or to refine and improve a process in our club. People need to implement, and implementation takes time, which is why we give them the tools, or we give them the blank template for it, right? This is how ideas are shared between clubs rather than like around the table discussions, is having good resources. I'll give you an example of mine, which is straight out of some president training I did a while back. My resource was this. It was a sticky note, but it was the back of it or the front of it. This is a resource I give out in president's training, because you can steal this if you want, Paul, or not. I don't care. You're a big boy. The thing I found watching a lot of presidents, I think it was when I was area director, was presidents would get to the end of the meeting and they'd be like, oh, thanks for the Toastmaster. What else have I got to do? And because, you know, your mind's elsewhere during a meeting, you've just watched speeches, you're thinking about packing up the room. It's like, oh, I guess I got to ask guests. And then all that was needed was the world's simplest checklist. And so I say to presidents as part of my training, have checklists. I used to carry the same sticky note around in my Toastmasters folder every time I was president. And I stole this idea off someone else, right? But I refined it, and this is mine, right? So you might just say, I have a checklist, which is this. At the end of the meeting, I'm going to give thanks to the Toastmaster, the VPE, whoever brought supper, whoever it is, right? We've got our awards to give out. In my club, there's one. Your club might have more. I'm going to ask the guests for their comments, and then any upcoming events. Right. And again, it's this idea we're talking about before about being ready, you know, being ready for a training session. You look professional. When you're ready as a president, it just looks professional, right? Really useful tool that has contributed to the success of my club. And it's contributed to the success of other clubs now as well, which is just amazing. I love that. So that's an example of how you go about having a resource. And the important thing is this, my rule is, my other rule for resources is never, ever, ever, ever share a resource without having given it context. Resources or content that does not have context is spam. And by that, I mean, VP again, VPPR, right? VPPR, maybe I present my session, I talk about how to find guests, can have members and Facebook, right? I talk about these three things. And then afterwards, I send them this email that has a template for something else that I didn't quite talk about. I just think, you know, like they'll sort it out. They won't. All we've done is just give them information that now they now have to process. So if you have a resource, make sure that it fits into your triangle, into one of those three, and that you talk about it and how you use it, right? Again, that sentence, this is a thing that has contributed to the success of my club. None of this is like, I'll send you an entire Google Drive folder at the end of it, because it doesn't help. It turns people off. So there it is, right? When we talk about resources, I just drove into my own chair. When we talk about resources, Suzanne, like with Easy Speak or a budget, you can bring those up on screen, you know, but we haven't created a PowerPoint. We haven't really created resources. You know, if you've got a forward plan, maybe you just like delete your club members' names out of it and make a copy of it. But we haven't created anything particularly new. We are going with what works for my club. Is that helpful? Has that been good? Think about what resources I'm going to give in my session that bloody get used and make a difference to other clubs who maybe don't do things the same or quite as well as I do. Yeah. Any questions on resources? Lorraine, I can see your hand up.
Just trying to unmute. Does anybody know? Oh, now I've lost. I've lost my thought. Sorry. Anybody know an expert on Free Toast Toast?
Yeah, we have a Free Toast Toast ambassador, Pam Holly.
Oh, right. Thank you.
If you reach out to Pam, she's good at getting things set up, and I'm currently helping some other clubs with like website strategy in my role as well. But
we use Free Toast Toast, but I don't think we use it to its fullest advantage.
Okay, feel free to drop me an email, and I'm happy to have a look at your website and see if it's a Pam or something I can help out with. Yep, Jennifer.
Thanks, Thomas. I guess my question is that when you do a training, it's a PowerPoint necessity in terms of showing what's your agenda, what you're going to talk about, and then the resources will be things you demo as you go along. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to split it. The only thing I would comment on there is I very rarely, present with a PowerPoint at all. In all of my Toastmastering and professional world, I can think of one segment that has a PowerPoint. Just because I personally think there's a lot of it in the world. But yeah, you're right. A PowerPoint is the thing you would display. Resources are a thing that you can send or live demo, or you can bring them up on the screen in lieu of a PowerPoint. Like if you're doing a budget walkthrough or something like that. Yeah. Okay.
So you're saying it's not necessary. There are other ways of, just like what you've done today with us. There's no PowerPoint, but you use the whiteboard to show us what you're going to go through today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
If you're online as well, obviously you've got the share screen button, which I use as well. Usually confuse myself with. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Last of all, let's move on down the bottom to, I keep referring to a whiteboard that you can't see. Isn't that helpful? It's like I'm live. We're going to look at engagement. And engagement with the room gives everybody two things. It gives you control and it gives you confidence, because knowing that you're going to be able to have engagement and keep an audience engaged is going to give you confidence. And more importantly, the way that comes across looks to them like you're in control, right? And so they're going to be comfortable and confident with you going, yep, this person knows what they're on about. And, sort of like we hinted at the top, which is engagement with a training session lives on a spectrum. Meaning at one end, you've kind of got, down here, you've got no engagement. It's just a lecture and nobody wants that. And then we go all the way to the other end where we just cede control entirely to the room. And we end up with this discussion that may or may not stay on track. And so we want somewhere right in the middle. Within a range in the middle. Like I say, sometimes I'm a bit of a cowboy when I train and I let things go wild. So a structure has a potential to fall apart either way. So let's use the chat here. Jump on into the chat. I want you to give me some ideas for how you would engage with an audience. How would you get engagement with an audience? What are some of the things you can do? Yep, ask questions. Open questions. Oh, I'll come back to that, Ian. Yep. Ask specific questions. Oh, we've got the gamut of questions here now. Relax. Okay, I'm not sure if that's an instruction to me or you just ask people to relax. Yeah, good one, John. Doing an activity from Karen. Absolutely. I feel like we've done that one today. Tick. Yeah, good on me. Does anybody? Well, let's refer to individuals by name and invite to contribute to the discussion. I feel like you guys are just telling me what I'm doing, which that's cool. This is why we go to other training sessions, to nick ideas as well. So make sure quiet ones have a chance to input. Yeah. Make sure they have the chance, but there's not always a need to force people to communicate. Might be something like, hey, do you have something to add here, Shakara? No, okay, that's cool. We can move on. What about what we're literally doing right now? Online. We can use the chat. I want you to jump down the chat and just type the letter J. We can use the chat. I'm going to see who writes that first now. A brainstorm, yeah, it's the letter J. Great. Room of funny people. Brainstorms, yes, we have a discussion as well in there, Lorraine, with some boundaries. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. We do all of these things, ask questions, we get people to contribute, we can use the chat. Sometimes I find use with the whiteboard. If the whiteboard is on a different side of the room to me, people actually physically have to pivot, which everyone kind of thinks is annoying, but I've just made them move. We can have a discussion, we can have breakouts, we can ask for brainstorms and get them to do an activity, to write things down. Right? There is so many things that we can do to get people engaged without ceding full control of the session away from us having control. And there's obviously some differences between online and in person. In person, quite different. You can get people to call out. We can rapid fire, get people to physically move. It's a lot more difficult to do online. But online, we can use the chat. We have polls. We have breakout rooms, right? In a room, in a physical room, we can't do breakout rooms unless I send people outside, or otherwise all the conversations clash. So we have a little bit of a think about the format that we're going to be presenting. Kind of as we started with, the biggest tool, I think, is to ask questions. I am extremely specific around the questions that I ask. There is a psychology and a process to it. And that is that I ask questions that lead in the direction I want to go. I don't ask questions that let other people give me direction on where to go. I make sure that my questions already lead in the direction that I want to go. And this maybe sounds perhaps slightly narcissistic and very controlling of me, and I appreciate that. But ultimately, I'm trying to keep to time here and give people the best education experience possible. Yeah, don't embarrass or ridicule people for sure, John. Yeah, and the only person I'll throw any sort of possible joke at is Rosie, because I think she likes me. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, we have good fun with our audience as well. So you're very careful around asking the questions to get the answers that you want. All right? Ask questions to get the answers that you want. I'll tell you that just off Zoom, I don't know if you've noticed that I change windows every now and then. I have a script sitting behind here with every question I ask scripted. I've actually lost my place just now. Every question I ask here is prepared, and I know what answers I want. Okay. I very, very rarely will ask a question off the top of my head, because I know that my questions need to lead in a direction. Okay, so let's give an example of this, because I get that it's quite ethereal. Let's use VPE training. I'm presenting a VPE session, and I think a question that I would hear that I think is a poor example is, how do you put your agenda together? I think that's a really low level, not productive question, because what happens is the first person will start going into a lengthy process and they explain, and I've now burned 5 minutes. And somebody else might say, oh, we don't really do an agenda because of X, Y, and Z, and we used to have this member. And then somebody else will say, we're really regimented about how we do our agenda. And then it's like, oh, what you can't do it. Somebody will say, you can't do an agenda without a forward plan. We need to talk about forward planning. And all of a sudden, I've lost control. The better question to ask there, right? And again, sorry, I should say, we asked that into a room of 20 people. It's an immediate invitation for derailment. And it's really, really hard to come back from that. And I don't believe that people will speak, lengthy or challenge a presenter because they're a loudmouth or a pain. I think it's just because people like to share their experience. That's the type of organization we are. A better question might be this. How far in advance do you send your agenda out? Do you see the possible responses here are much more limited? And obviously you can see the place where this would fit in VPE training, right? How far in advance do you guys send your agenda out? Feel free to just drop it in the chat. Right, I might say something like that. And Rosie might say, oh, we always send ours a week in advance. Great. Lorraine might say, oh, we kind of forget to do that a fair bit. Okay. Lorraine does it in a fortnight, sorry. Deb might say, not at all. Paul might say, we only send it to guests. But what we're getting at is, okay, cool. It sounds like a fortnight in advance, 6 days, a week. Cool. It's great to see you guys are sending it in advance. A few people I noticed weren't. Let's have a talk about the benefits of sending your agenda in advance. A, B, C. Cool. My suggestion is aim for 6 days in advance. Okay. You can see that question gets people involved, but it doesn't really have opportunity to derail. If somebody started talking about something else, I might say, look, I'm just going to interrupt you quickly there, Rosie. I like what you're talking about, but we're just talking about sending the agenda in advance. Do you send your agenda in advance? She go, oh yeah, 6 days. Cool, perfect. Okay. We've established and can maintain the control, direction, and timing of our sessions. Another place to put questions is way up here at this stage. No, it's not. It's in the introduction, right? We've got our 3 things that we want to talk about. And in the introduction, I might come along and say, hey guys, we're doing VPE training. Look, what are you guys are all a bit experienced. It's February now. We've been doing this role. What are the big things that you see, the big pieces of the role when it comes to being a VPE? And what I would do in that instance is I would just start writing a list, right? So Rosie says agenda, and Lorraine says forward plan, and Karen says managing members' goals, and John says pathways, and Suzanne says branding or something, and then Jennifer says meeting energy. And you make this big list. And everybody's like, got their thing. Yeah, I've contributed that. And what you can do, knowing that you have your 3 things, agenda, forward plan, pathways, you might say, everything everybody has put here, as suggested here, is really important. Today we have time to cover just 3 of them. The 3 that I want to cover are this one, this one, and this one. All the others, maybe some of the answers will sort of come out anyway. If it's a particular concern of you, feel free to drop me a message. We will talk through it. But I want to get through the big 3 things today. All right? People have a bit more buy-in into the content that we're about to walk through. That can be a useful one. Yeah. And then be ready. The last thing I would say is just be ready all the time to regain control of the conversation if someone is being a bit chatty. And I'm going to jump into the second page. I nearly ended the meeting. I clicked the wrong button. That was terrifying. I'm going to jump into, this is not the second page, this is another handout. This is the summary of what we've talked about today, okay? So over here on the left, we have the structure, the resources, and the engagement, right? With the time you have, the best tool is to ask questions, talked about that. Ask questions to lead in the direction you want to go, and know what questions you'll ask and what answers you want. All right, and you start to get a bit of a feel for knowing what question you need to ask to get the right answer. Sometimes, you know, first time I try a question, I get some strange answers and I have to reframe it a little bit. But down the bottom here is indexed phrases. Indexed phrases, I'll share that again in a second. Indexed phrases is, we've all done this with table topics, I know it, which is you get asked a question, you talk for 2 minutes, and then during the break, you're like, oh, I just got a better response for that. Right? We've all done that, right? You get a better answer half an hour later. And I applied the exact same thing to interactions with an audience. So I'm talking today, and then Rosie starts trying to drag us off topic, and I'm like, oh, I struggle to get her back on track. It's like, Rosie, I need to talk about, and then half an hour later, I think, in that moment, it's like a bit emotional. I'm stressed. I'm looking at the time, and I don't want to like upset Rosie. I don't want to upset me. And it's really hard to think of a good response. And then half an hour later, when everyone's chilled out, and I've finished the session, I think, oh, what I should have said was this. And so I literally index those phrases mentally for me. I just think next time somebody tries to drag me off track, I've got a really good sentence. And so that's what I've given you here. These are somewhat in my voice. You can modify them to your own or come up with your own, okay? So somebody tries dragging you off track when you're doing engagement. So who's on my screen? John. John start getting a bit chatty. It's like, hey, John, I'm very conscious of time here, so I'm just going to pull us back on track. Oh, okay. All right. That's pretty calm. All right. Maybe a bit of discussion breaks out. It's like, hey, look, guys, I'm loving the discussion. We do have a bit more to cover, so let's continue. All right. Or maybe Shakara's got a particular a thing that's going wrong in her club and it's annoying her, right? But it's taking up some time. It's like, I understand your issue here. I know exactly what's going wrong. Let's have a chat after this session and we'll sort it out. Yeah. Having these phrases sort of on the top of your head is super, super helpful. You may have seen me deploy some of these at times. Indexed phrases to make sure that you stay in control. They're all very respectful. Of course, we try to keep in line with, I would say, like Toastmasters core values, but like just being a human, around I don't want to make people feel bad. I just, you know, I deploy one of these and people go, oh yeah, I'm a bit chatty, I apologize, right? And that's fine. Okay, so that's how I go about engagement. Using questions is the big one, but certainly think about how I can get people to move or think or write or have a little bit of a chat. I'm going to share the screen one last time here. Okay, so today we have gone through the and less triangle and how to structure your information. 3 big ideas. There's the handout, whoopsie, the handout. I will share this summary sheet as well in just a moment. We've got the handout, the introduction, body, conclusion, and make sure that we set and adhere strictly to planned timings. Resources. We don't need to create anything new. Just make sure we can always introduce it with that sentence of, this is a thing that has contributed to the success of my club. Right? This is a document that has contributed. This is a checklist. Right? And I've got some examples there. You've got some dot points to write your own. We had a few in the chat. We had, there was a budget and a forward plan and some stuff. I've got some others in here that I have shared or other people, I've seen other people share, you know, an example Facebook post for VPPR, secretary, if we had a secretary, you know, template for minutes, survey forms if we're doing maybe member goals or what have you, all right? And the engagement that we just touched on as well. So like I said before, if you're a division director in the room, have a look around the room. If you're somebody who's not a division director, consider reaching out to them with, I'm guessing, you know, we went through the triangle. You've got the structure there, pretty close to having a template that I'm sure you could run. It may not be perfect, but if you had to run it tomorrow, I reckon it would work pretty well for you. So consider reaching out. That's all the content I have. I have one more question, and that is what I would like you to drop it in the chat, and I'll share that last resource. Drop in the chat, what's been your big takeaway from this session? What's been the light bulb moment this afternoon? The triangle? Yep. I like that you like that, Lorraine. Like I said, it's a savage piece of gear, that one, but I think it makes a big difference. And the 3 key ideas, content triangle. Yeah, cool. Glad that you like the triangle. Using scripted questions to achieve direction. For sure, John. For sure. No, it's not John at all. Deb, reading wrong name. Less is fine. It's a big one, Rosie. There's a big thing we learned in our business, actually, which is it's far better to cover 20% of the content at 100% of the depth than to cover 100% of the content at 20% depth. Give them 20% this month, 20% next month, whatever it might be. We just need to get people started or patched as best possible. Yeah, less is fine. How to better engage with time and discussions. Perfect. What others chatted? Triangle, scripted questions. Right. Yay, we like the triangle. Amazing. I've put the summary up in the chat up there. That's all the content I have. Thank you very kindly. If you have gotten what you need, I'm going to hand back to Deb, but I'll also stick around for questions. If you have questions, I'm happy to sit here until your questions are answered. But thank you very kindly for giving up a little part of your Sunday afternoon. I recognise that it's a bit of a donation, but to the success of this organisation that we all love, and that's pretty cool. So thank you very kindly, and I'll hand us back to Deb.
Thank you very much, Thomas.